Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. This Sunday is particularly significant for me because for those of you that have been following the food sobriety experiment, today is 365 days food sober. I could tell you a little more about what that means, but having said all of that, it has been a really interesting ride. And many of you have reached out to ask me about it or, wonder how I came to this conclusion or what have you. As you know, I've been health coaching people for 8 years now. If you didn't know that that's what I do, well, that's what I do. And I love it. I'm passionate about it. I feel like that's a missing link that has been just this big glaring hole in this food world for such a long, long time. But there are many people who use food for a variety of reasons. Now, some people don't have that issue, and I'm not here to give you a disease you don't have. I'm telling you, I've had this disease for a really, really, really long time. I've known it since I was young. But when I was young, I didn't understand it. As I grew older, I didn't know how to address it, and I kept trying to address it with diets, which didn't work. Our program is significant in that it will give you the structural piece you need for food, but the bigger part of this is really about what do you want? Who do you want to become? And so as I started this experiment and I started asking myself those questions, I went back to something my pastors at Living Word Bible Church here in Mesa talked about, which was who you are in God. Where does your value really come from? Well, guess what? It doesn't come from your parents. It doesn't come from your peers. It doesn't come from your coworkers. It comes from someplace much, much bigger than that. And when you understand that, you understand that nothing trumps that. Nothing. God doesn't make any junk. So looking at that premise, looking at the coaching and the way I've been working with people and working with myself, I happened to be watching an episode of House of Cards. Don't watch a lot of TV, but this happened to be one that, everybody said, oh, watch this. So we kind of got into it. And if you know the series, there's a character by the name of Doug Stamper who's an alcoholic. And he explains to this girl who asks him, well, what happens if you fall off the wagon? And he said, I go back to day zero. And in much nicer terms, cleaning it up for Facebook, he basically says, screw the zero. And I thought, yeah, screw the zero. Why keep living Groundhog's Day over and over and over again? If you remember that movie, what did he do, right? He kept getting up every day doing the same thing, but it wasn't until he started taking a look around him. He lifted his head. He looked around. Who am I encountering? How am I reacting to that? What's happening in my life? Instead of just trotting through and butting up against the same obstacles over and over, that's when things started to change. And so there's been these little catalysts along the way. And food sobriety has taught me a couple of things. It really boiled down my food decisions to yes or no. Am I going to use or am I not? And when I talk about using, I mean people use food. I used food for a variety of things, mostly stress reduction. But people use food for entertainment. They use it when they're tired or they're stressed out or they're lonely. They need something to fill a void, or they're angry and they don't know where to put it, or they're just bored. Well, what do I do next? Well, what do you want to do? What is food going to do to fill that? So food lights up, especially sugars, the same parts of the brain as alcohol and drugs, and we're predisposed to needing food for our survival. And I have a lot of people say, well, Lori, an alcoholic doesn't ever have to touch alcohol again, but I have to eat. Yeah, true statement. You don't have to eat crap. So that statement doesn't hold water for me anymore. Yes, you have to eat, but you don't have to eat the donuts and the Twinkies and the, you know, the whole pizzas, or the, I go out to these places. A year ago, we happened to be at a place downtown Phoenix, and they served this massive, like, chili dog. I mean, the thing is like this big. Well, it's funny and it's ridiculous until you see someone that so obviously has an issue with food. I'm not being mean here, so please don't Facebook me mean things, but they obviously have an issue and they're downing all of this, and it makes me sad. It makes me sad because it's just become this thing. So you don't have to eat junky food, and maybe that this isn't your thing, but that's a full disclosure statement for me. It was my thing. It is my thing. It will always be my thing. Wanting it will always be my thing. But there's a difference between wanting it, understanding that's what I want, and understanding that I'm becoming someone else. And that's been the shift, is in the becoming, which is that decision every single day. Who am I? Where does my value come from? Who am I becoming? And am I sober? Yes or no? And then the final piece of that is taking the scale out of the mix. And by that, I'm saying I weigh myself every day. Now, for a lot of my clients, I don't recommend that, because too often people get on the scale and, oh my gosh, if they're up, a half a pound, they're freaking out and, oh, this isn't working. I mean, they just place so much importance on that. When I shifted to sobriety, okay, the scale says what it says. Am I sober or am I not? That's yes or no. And that's not lying to yourself. That's being 100% upfront and making that the focus. Are you doing your program? Yes or no? Because if you're doing your program, the scale's going to take care of itself. So I can weigh every day now, knowing full well that, there's natural body fluctuations week in and week out. Am I sober or am I not? And then all of the rest follows. So that, coupled with, the program that I coach people through, that's pretty powerful stuff. And that puts you in a state of mind of not being on a diet. It is about creating the lifestyle. For me, it had to be about being sober, because food could get out of control. There were times when I'd get it under control, and then it would be out of control because it was a use of something to create something else, to fill a void. Well, anytime you're looking to just fill a void, probably aren't going to be filling it with something that's very good. For me, that was a God thing, and that's always been a big part of my life. You call it whatever. I know what that is very clearly for me. But more importantly, it was understanding how much we are all loved. And I look around me and I think, well, there's so much, despair and division and frustration, and common sense just seems to be thrown out the window all over the place. And I feel like, wow, I just don't know how we got here. We got here because collectively, many of us are there in our own lives. Even when I go to church and I look around and people's heads are just down, or they're not looking outward. They're just looking down and they're going through motions. And it's when you can look up, when you can look out, when you can connect with people, one to another, and know that we don't need to be asleep at the wheel anymore. Life's pretty short. And a lot of people can be asleep at the wheel. And one of the ways that they put themselves on cruise control is through, you know, drugs, alcohol, food, sex, gambling, whatever the it is. Not everybody in the world's addicted. I'm not saying that. This has been a very interesting experiment for me to see where this was going to lead me, to see where and how I could help somebody else with that, and to see if we're thinking about where we're at in our lives. And sometimes when you're young, you don't have time for that. Maybe if we started doing it a little earlier, maybe if we learned these things a little earlier, we wouldn't wake up 30 years down the road and go, what just happened? These are things I wish I had known, maybe younger, but maybe I wasn't ready for that. Either way, I'm on to the next step. Tomorrow will be day 366. I will be asking myself the question, am I sober? Am I not? Screw the zero. Don't want to do Groundhog's Day, because there's stuff to do. There's people to see. There's people to help. There's places to go. There's experiences to have. And, I want to be sliding in sideways going, woohoo, what a ride. So I hope you feel that way too. I've had a lot of people reach out, like I said, about this, and, I would love to share it with you. I'm happy to help. And even if you want to just bounce some stuff off, I'm here. This is what the whole experiment's about, and why I'm doing full disclosure, even though I know family and friends and people I love are going to see it. It's okay, because they'll love me anyway. And if they don't, it's okay too. People take different paths in life, and that's all right. But I hope you have a great Sunday. That's day 365 for me. And, maybe there's a day one for you too.